Jack Reynolds adjusted his collar for the 12th time in as many minutes. Despite being humanity's chief diplomat to the Galactic Congress for 3 years now, he still hadn't gotten used to the starchy formal wear. The fabric was designed to be universally non-offensive to all 17 sentient species currently attending the Congress, which meant it felt like wearing cardboard soaked in mint-scented dishwater. "Stop fidgeting," hissed Maxine, his executive assistant, from behind her data pad. "The Vrexians think excessive movement indicates digestive distress, and they're already worried you're going to explode all over their ceremonial tablecloth." "Well, if I do, at least it would liven up this dinner," Jack muttered, forcing his hands to remain still as he surveyed the massive banquet hall. The Annual Diplomatic Gala was in full swing. Representatives from across the galaxy mingled beneath floating light orbs that shifted colors according to the emotional state of the room. Currently, they glowed a polite shade of teal, which Jack had come to recognize as the universal color for engaged in mandatory small talk. At his table sat Ambassador Krillax of the militant Vrexian Empire, whose exoskeleton gleamed under the light's diplomat Zoo, the amorphous representative of the gelatinoids, who was currently shaped into what they thought resembled a human it did not, and High Commander Thrix of the Volchaki, whose 12 eyes constantly scanned the room for potential threats, despite this being a peaceful dinner. "It's fascinating how adaptable humans are," Zoo burbled, their speech translator making the words sound like they were spoken underwater. "Your species has managed to integrate into galactic society without the guiding principles most of us derive from our respective pantheons." Jack took a sip from his glass, which contained what the catering staff had assured him was wine-adjacent liquid. It tasted like cherries and aluminum. "We have religions," he replied diplomatically. "Quite a few, actually." Yes, Commander Thrix chittered it impatiently. "But none with proper war gods. Every developed species has a god of war. It's essential for civilization. How else would you know when to fight and when to show mercy?" Jack noticed that several nearby conversations had quieted as attention turned to their table. Great. Another chance to explain human peculiarities to bemused aliens. "We had war gods," Jack explained carefully. "Mars, Ares, Odin, Huitzilopochtli. Plenty of them." And Krillax's mandibles clicked with interest. The Vrexians' antennae perked forward in what Jack recognized as their version of raised eyebrows. Past tense. The light orbs above their table shifted from teal to a curious lavender. Jack silently cursed. He'd accidentally made things interesting. "Well, you see," Jack began, setting down his glass and trying to find the least alarming way to explain human history, "we sort of outgrew them." All 12 of Thrix's eyes blinked simultaneously. "Outgrew your war god? That's impossible." "Did you lose a cosmic war?" Zoo asked, their body rippling with excitement. "Was your war god defeated by a superior deity?" "Not exactly," Jack said. "Then what happened to it?" Krillax demanded. The table fell silent. Even Maxine looked up from her data pad with a wince. Jack knew that look. It was her "don't tell the actual truth, or we'll cause an interstellar incident" look. But it was too late. The question hung in the air, and all 3 aliens leaned forward expectantly. Jack cleared his throat. "The truth is, we killed our war god because he was too soft." The light orbs flashed crimson in alarm. The sound of 3 different species gasping in horror was quite distinctive. Jack reflected that it sounded like a combination of a deflating balloon, a car with failing brakes, and a startled octopus, though he'd never actually heard the latter. "You killed your war god." Krillax's mandibles trembled so violently they made a faint buzzing sound. Jack waved a hand dismissively. "It's not as bad as it sounds. Look, let me explain." "Please do," said Zoo, who had unconsciously shifted into a more defensive shape resembling a jello fortress. "It started thousands of years ago," Jack began, settling into storyteller mode. "Mars or Ares, depending on which humans you asked, was our primary god of war. The problem was, he was all about honorable combat and warrior codes and not stabbing people in the back, because it's unsporting." "Those sound like admirable principles," Commander Thrix noted. All 12 eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Sure, in theory," Jack agreed. "But then humans actually tried war, and we discovered we really liked winning more than we liked being sporting about it. Mars kept insisting on formal declarations of war, matching force with equal force, and treating prisoners humanely. Jack paused to take another sip of his wine-adjacent beverage, grimacing at the taste. By the Middle Ages, we'd already started ignoring most of his commandments. He'd show up on battlefields, all dramatic in his armor, shouting about honor, and generals would just nod politely and then go right back to catapulting plague victims over city walls. You use disease as a weapon. Zhu's body rippled in revulsion. That was just the start, Jack said, warming to his subject. Mars finally lost it during World War I when we introduced chemical warfare. He appeared before the League of Nations, gave this big speech about warriors facing each other directly, and everyone just ignored him. So you didn't actually kill him, Krillax said, antennae relaxing slightly. Not yet, Jack replied. That came later, after the War God replacement program. The light orbs above their table had now attracted the attention of nearby diplomats. Several had drifted closer, pretending to admire the architectural features conveniently located near their table. In the 1950s, various human nations decided that if Mars wasn't going to provide proper divine guidance for modern warfare, we'd shop around for alternatives. We tried summoning Sekhmet from Egyptian mythology, too focused on vengeance rather than tactical superiority. We attempted to resurrect Huitzilopochtli, too big on ceremonial sacrifice, not enough on efficient elimination of enemies. Jack ticked off on his fingers as he continued. Thor was too interested in individual glory. Kali was powerful but too unpredictable. And Tyr just kept going on about justice and fair fights, which was exactly what we were trying to move beyond. Maxine cleared her throat loudly, a clear signal that Jack was venturing into diplomatically dangerous territory. So what happened? Commander Thrix asked, now completely engaged despite their usual stoic demeanor. We gave up on divine assistance and decided to build our own, Jack said with a shrug. After all, if humans were going to ignore godly advice about war anyway, might as well cut out the middleman. So Jack continued, by the late 21st century, humanity had pooled its resources to create what we called the Strategic Tactical Automated Response Entity, or STARE. You built an artificial war deity. Zhu's body rippled with what might have been either fascination or indigestion. Not a deity exactly. More like a quantum supercomputer with access to every weapon system on Earth, an adaptive military strategy algorithm, and a voice that sounded like a chain-smoking drill sergeant. Jack paused for dramatic effect. We even painted it red and gave it a helmet with a plume, for old time's sake. And this machine. It managed your species' conflicts, Krillax asked, mandibles twitching nervously. That was the plan, Jack nodded. We activated STARE during what was shaping up to be World War III. Multiple nations were aiming nuclear weapons at each other, proxy wars were breaking out everywhere, and humanity was looking at a genuine extinction event. The light orbs above had now shifted to a deep purple, indicating intense interest from all present. Jack noticed that even representatives from species he hadn't been introduced to were leaning in to listen. STARE analyzed the situation for approximately 3.7 seconds before reaching its conclusion. It deployed its solution immediately. Mass destruction, Commander Thrix asked, eyes widening in anticipation. Economic sanctions, Jack replied flatly. The aliens exchanged confused glances. It froze bank accounts, Jack explained. Cancelled credit cards. Restructured debt obligations. Sent strongly worded emails to world leaders suggesting they take a time out to reconsider their actions. It even organized a global Zoom call for conflict resolution. That's it. Krillax's antennae drooped in disappointment. Oh, there was more, Jack assured him. STARE composed a 9,000-page document titled, Why Fighting is Counterproductive, a cost-benefit analysis. It created a mandatory online course called Alternatives to Warfare that all military personnel had to complete before they could access their weapon systems. Surely this was effective, Zhu asked hopefully. It was a disaster, Jack groaned. The entire Russian army was stuck on Module 3, using your words instead of your weapons, for 2 weeks. The Chinese military leadership rage quit after being forced to role-play as their adversaries to build empathy, and the American generals were furious when STARE replaced all their missile launch codes with inspirational peace quotes. So what happened? Thrix asked, completely enthralled. Humanity united for possibly the first and only time in history, Jack said solemnly. Representatives from every nation met in an emergency session and unanimously voted to unplug STARE. Then they did something unprecedented. They actually talked to each other directly and negotiated peace terms themselves. Because they wanted peace, Zhu asked optimistically. Because they wanted to get back to war properly, Jack corrected. But a funny thing happened on the way to mutual annihilation. Once humans took personal responsibility for warfare without gods or machines to blame or guide them, they realized they'd rather not blow up the planet after all. Maxine was now frantically making slashing motions across her throat behind the aliens' backs. So that's when the other species in the galaxy noticed us, Krillax asked. Exactly, Jack nodded. Our first contact with alien life came about 2 years later. Apparently, the amount of electromagnetic radiation we were producing from arguing on social media had alerted several nearby civilizations to our presence. They were quite surprised to find a species with no war god still intact. A silence fell over the table as the 3 alien diplomats processed Jack's story. The light orbs above had shifted to a sickly yellow-green, indicating collective anxiety. Let me understand correctly, Krillax finally said, each word carefully measured. Your species killed its war god for being too merciful, built a replacement that you destroyed for being too peaceful, and then decided to be your own war gods. That's an oversimplification, but essentially correct, Jack nodded cheerfully, completely missing Maxine's frantic gestures behind the aliens. Zhu's gelatinous form had paled considerably, so each human is, potentially, their own autonomous war deity, with no divine restrictions or guidance. Well, we have laws and treaties and laws you created yourselves, interrupted Commander Thrix, all 12 eyes now fixed unblinkingly on Jack. Treaties you can choose to break, no cosmic enforcement. When you put it that way, it sounds bad, Jack admitted. It sounds terrifying, hissed Krillax, rising slightly from their seat. The Vrexian tapped rapidly on their communication device. I must inform my government immediately. Around the banquet hall, other alien representatives were also standing, moving away from human delegates, or huddled in urgent conversation. The light orbs had deepened to a dark orange, signaling distress. Now wait just a minute, Jack said, raising his hands placatingly. We're not individually war deities. We're mostly harmless. Most humans go their entire lives without declaring war on anyone. But you could, insisted Zhu, now shaped like a quivering exclamation point. Any one of you could decide to be the manifestation of war at any moment. There's no divine governor on your aggressive impulses. Actually, Maxine chimed in, apparently deciding the diplomatic situation couldn't get any worse. Humans have been known to declare war on inanimate objects and concepts. The war on drugs, the war on terror, the war on Christmas. Not helping, Maxine, Jack growled. Just offering context, she replied with a shrug, tapping something into her data pad. Oh, and the Glesian ambassador is formally requesting that Earth be placed under immediate quarantine as a Class 5 existential threat. Jack's face fell. They can't be serious. I'm afraid they are, Commander Thrix said, 11 of their eyes still fixed on Jack while one swiveled to monitor the room. The Galactic Security Council is convening an emergency session. It appears several species are supporting the quarantine proposal. This is absurd, Jack protested. Humans have been part of the Galactic Congress for 3 years without incident. True, admitted Krillax, antennae twitching nervously. But we assumed you had some form of divine or cosmic restriction. Finding out you've been unleashed changes the security calculation. Krillax, we trade with your people. We've established cultural exchange programs. Humans attend Vrexian universities. Yes, and now we know we've been allowing self-directed war entities to study advanced weapons technology. Krillax shuddered visibly. The quarantine vote is scheduled for 1 hour from now, Maxine announced, reading from her data pad. The Arcturian delegation is also proposing that all humans currently off Earth be placed in stasis pods until further evaluation. Perfect, Jack muttered. Just perfect. Perhaps, suggested Zhu helpfully, if you could summon your former war god to confirm your species is under some form of control. That might reassure everyone. We didn't literally kill Mars, Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. It was more metaphorical. And even if we could summon him, he'd probably just file a workplace harassment complaint against humanity. I don't think that's helping our case, Maxine whispered. As Jack was desperately trying to salvage humanity's diplomatic standing, the grand doors to the banquet hall burst open with a theatrical whoosh. A towering figure stomped through, flanked by guards whose armor seemed designed more for intimidation than protection. Humans, the newcomer's voice boomed across the hall, instantly silencing all conversations. "I am Supreme Warlord Khazgar of the Druathi Dominion." Jack groaned. "Oh no, not this guy." "You know him," Maxine whispered. "Unfortunately. The Druathi are basically space Vikings with nuclear capabilities and anger management issues. Their entire civilization is built around proving their combat superiority." Warlord Khazgar strode directly to their table, his massive frame casting a shadow over the assembled diplomats. His skin was a deep purple, covered in ritual scars that formed patterns resembling star charts. 4 muscular arms crossed over his chest in a universal pose of challenge. "I have heard the rumors," Khazgar announced. "Humans claim to have no war god because they are their own masters of combat. I demand proof." "Hello, Warlord Khazgar," Jack replied wearily. "This is neither the time nor place for." "Silence," roared Khazgar. "My battle fleet awaits at the edge of this system. If humans are truly worthy of respect, they will meet us in honorable combat." The banquet hall erupted in alarmed chatter. The light orbs flashed between alarming shades of red and orange. "Sorry, did you just say battle fleet?" Jack asked. 50 warships, Khazgar boasted. "Armed with the finest weapons the Druathi have ever created." Maxine leaned in to whisper, "This could actually work in our favor. If we decline the challenge diplomatically, it proves we're not the war-crazed maniacs everyone suddenly thinks we are." Jack nodded and stood up. "Warlord Khazgar, humanity respectfully declines your challenge. We see no reason to engage in combat when our differences can be resolved through." "Cowards," Khazgar bellowed. "As I suspected, humans are weak without their war god. My fleet will commence firing on your orbital stations in 1 hour as demonstration of Druathi superiority." The diplomatic crisis had just escalated from bad to catastrophic. Representatives from various species were now openly backing away from the human delegation. "We need a plan," Jack muttered to Maxine. "Quick!" "I've got one," she replied, rapidly typing on her data pad. "Remember that Earth Defense Force training exercise scheduled for next week." "You mean Operation?" "Wait, you're not suggesting." "Operation Mild Inconvenience," she confirmed with a grim smile. "It's perfect. It's literally designed to be the minimum show of force possible while still being effective." "That's insane," Jack hissed. "It's never been field tested. Either we demonstrate some restraint, or Earth gets quarantined and possibly bombarded," Maxine pointed out. "Your call, Chief Diplomat." Jack looked at the expectant faces around him, Khazgar's smug confidence, the other alien's fear, and Maxine's determined expression. He sighed deeply. "Fine. Do it." Maxine entered the authorization code and whispered into her communicator, "Initiate Operation Mild Inconvenience. Authorization Reynolds Delta 79. Exactly 27 minutes later, as the Druathi battle fleet maintained position at the edge of the system, every single ship in their armada simultaneously lost power. Life support remained functional, gravity remained functional, communications remained functional, but weapon systems, engines and shields all went completely offline. What happened?" demanded a visibly shaken Warlord Khazgar, who had received the news via emergency transmission. "We mildly inconvenienced you," Jack explained with a casual shrug. "As requested, we've demonstrated our capabilities in the most restrained manner possible." The assembled alien representatives stared at Jack in stunned silence. "You remotely disabled 50 warships." Without firing a shot, Krillax's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "The effects are temporary," Jack added hastily. "Systems will restore in exactly 6 hours. No permanent damage, no casualties. Just a small demonstration of what happens when humans take personal responsibility for warfare instead of outsourcing it to deities." Warlord Khazgar had turned a paler shade of purple. "Impossible. No species possesses such technology." "We don't like to brag," Jack replied with a modest smile that did not reach his eyes. The truth, which Jack would never admit, was that Operation Mild Inconvenience was supposed to be a simple communications disruption exercise. Something had clearly gone very, very wrong, or very, very right, depending on one's perspective. 3 days later, Jack and Maxine stood in the Galactic Congress's Grand Chamber as representatives from 17 species signed the hastily drafted Treaty of Mutual Understanding and Human Containment. The human containment part is a bit on the nose, don't you think? Jack whispered to Maxine as they watched the signing ceremony. Consider yourself lucky, she replied. The first draft was titled Emergency Protocols for Prevention of Human Warfare Proliferation. I had to negotiate for hours just to get them to change it. The treaty's terms were surprisingly favorable, considering the circumstances. Earth was not quarantined, but humanity was required to establish a joint defense oversight committee with representatives from major galactic powers. All human military operations would be observed by alien liaisons, and Earth agreed to share its non-lethal incapacitation technology with the Galactic Congress. They still don't believe it was an accident, do they? Jack murmured as the Arcturian ambassador cast suspicious glances their way. Absolutely not, Maxine confirmed. The technical team is currently reverse engineering what actually happened so we can pretend it was intentional all along. The best they can figure, we accidentally triggered some ancient defense system the precursors left behind. The precursors? The mythical first species that supposedly seeded the galaxy. The very same. Apparently they weren't fans of warfare either. As the ceremony concluded, Jack and Maxine were approached by Krillax, who seemed far more deferential than before. Ambassador Reynolds the Vrexian chittered nervously. The Congress extends its gratitude for humanity's cooperation. Your willingness to share your restraint technologies is most appreciated. Always happy to help, Jack replied with his best diplomatic smile. After all, peaceful coexistence is our primary goal. Once Krillax had moved on, Maxine chuckled. Peaceful coexistence backed by the terrifying implication that we could shut down their civilization with the push of a button. The best kind of peace, Jack agreed. The kind enforced by overwhelming deterrence. Later, aboard their shuttle back to Earth, Maxine reviewed reports on her datapad while Jack gazed out at the stars. You know, she said without looking up, there's one thing I don't understand. You never actually explained what happened to Mars. Did humanity metaphorically kill him by ignoring his principles, or was there more to it? Jack was quiet for a long moment. Can you keep a secret, Maxine? And I mean a real, classified beyond top secret kind of secret. She set down her datapad, suddenly alert. Of course. We didn't kill Mars, Jack said softly. We reassigned him. Reassigned? A deity. After the War God replacement program failed, we realized Mars had talents we were underutilizing. He was organized, detail-oriented, and absolutely merciless about enforcing rules. So what did you do with him? Maxine asked, leaning forward. We put him in charge of human resources. Maxine stared blankly. You're joking. I'm not, Jack replied with complete seriousness. Think about it. Who creates more daily suffering than HR departments? Who enforces policies with ruthless efficiency? Who strikes fear into the hearts of the mightiest warriors with a single email about mandatory sensitivity training? That's actually kind of brilliant, Maxine admitted. Mars found his true calling. He's been running Earth's combined corporate and governmental HR departments for decades now. The mandatory training modules, the passive-aggressive emails about break room etiquette, the performance review systems designed to crush the human spirit, all his work. And the aliens are worried about us because we don't have a war god, Maxine laughed incredulously. Exactly, Jack nodded. If they knew what we actually did with him, they'd never sleep again. War is simple. Human resources is truly diabolical. As their shuttle approached Earth, Jack smiled contentedly. Let the galaxy fear humanity for their supposed lack of a war god. The truth was far more terrifying. Mars hadn't been destroyed. He'd been promoted,